Jeff Mayhugh here with a very special mini episode of the Representation Station. Um, it's obviously the 4th of July. America is 250 years free. And we decided that it would be a good idea to sit down and talk about the Declaration of Independence, what it means as a founding document and a document about representative democracy, how it relates to us today, and what we're going through in our battle to uncap the House and expand representation to everyday citizens again. So I sat down with my outreach lead, Rory Topping, and we had a little discussion about the Declaration. I hope you enjoy. All right, welcome in. I am Jeff Mayhugh, president of Project No Cap. I'm here with Rory Topping.
I am the outreach director for Project No Cap and happy to be here this morning.
We're going to do a quick little pod. It's the 4th of July, and we figured we kind of read the Declaration and just talk about it a little bit. Obviously, the Declaration is like the foundational document for our country. It's what separated us from Great Britain and kind of laid the framework for where we would go as a nation.
Yeah, it's the reason that we celebrate the 4th of July and not September 17th when they finished drafting the Constitution.
Absolutely. So the Declaration was written by a group of people. A lot of people attribute it to Thomas Jefferson, but it was Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Roger Sherman, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I believe so, yeah.
And we're just going to get right into reading it. So,
Oh.
when, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of God's and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So like that first paragraph is basically saying like it's kind of like a breakup letter. You know, that's what
Yeah,
I always think of the Declaration. It's a breakup letter. It's like it's a dear
not you,
John.
me.
Yeah. Dear King, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah. I, so like what do you take away? That's kind of what you get too, right?
Yeah, that's what I get. And, they make a specific reference to respect. And I think that's really what this comes down to. When you look at the events that led up to the Declaration being drafted, the colonists just consistently felt like they weren't being respected. They weren't being valued as citizens. And so, the accumulative effect of those things get to this point where they feel like they have to write this letter and essentially they have to break up with Great Britain.
Right. And so they go on, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator.
There because that is the line of the Declaration that so many people know and quote and is the source of so much controversy about this all men are created equal. There's the fact that, the country was obviously struggling with the slavery issue, the fact that they say men only. And so I feel like when people think of the Declaration, a lot of times they specifically think of that line.
Yeah. So it goes on that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, government are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. So, like you mentioned, they're talking about equality, and they use the term men, but we can apply persons to that term now, right? Like society grows, and what they're saying is that the government is only has power from the people that it governs. Without the people that it governs, it has no real power. And they're saying that they can create their own government to secure these rights if the British government isn't going to secure their rights, which they felt obviously that the British government wasn't doing.
Right. Yeah, I think that your overall assessment is correct. And I just am thinking, again, this is kind of like the most famous part of the Declaration and the reference to unalienable rights as well. And that comes back to the point that you were just making, the crux of those unalienable rights is that the people need to have a voice in what's happening. The government isn't something that just happens to them, it's something that they participate in.
Yes, that they participate in.
Mhm.
Um, let's see, where did I live off? That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governance long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. So what they're saying here is like we're doing something pretty radical. We are throwing off the bands of government and we're starting our new government, and we're not taking this lightly, right? Like we don't recommend everybody do this every time something doesn't go your way. And to lay some like foundation here, this is 1776 when this declaration was written.
Right.
The Stamp Act, the Townsend Act, the Tea Act, all of these things took place, leading up to this. It's been over a decade now.
Right.
Uh, the the United States or the colonies at the time, they had written a letter to Parliament, they had written a letter to the king, they had asked for, participation, like you mentioned before, in the government, and they basically been ignored. And so that's what they come to this kind of radical moment where they're like, all right, well, it's time to break up.
Well, so, as a Massachusetts native, I feel compelled to add it's not just all of the things you listed, but we also have the Boston Massacre, and we have the battles of Lexington and Concord, and ultimately the Battle of Bunker Hill. So there's this reference in what you just read to safety. And I think, in addition to all those legislative acts that they felt were oppressive, now we've actually got violence, with the British government. American citizens have been killed. And in turn, members of the British militia have been killed. And so that safety component, I think, is also a very, very important one because when all of this stuff is building, people are unhappy. But now we literally have people that have died. And that was a turning point for a lot of people. Of once violence became a part of this, it escalated the situation. And to your point, about we're doing this but we don't take it lightly, we don't recommend everybody do it. It's not just a breakup letter, it's like a divorce decree. Like it's serious. So yeah, I just think it's important to mention that the fact that things had escalated to a point where we're literally on the battlefield and people are dying, that just contributed to how serious the situation was and why we got to this point.
And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. So I find this line very interesting because basically what they're saying is like, you shouldn't do this because it's serious, right? Like, or you shouldn't do this unless it's really serious. This is a radical change. But we also recognize that people are kind of against radical change because it's scary. You're comfortable where you are, and there's probably going to be some difficulties ahead by taking this step. But we've thought this through and we're doing this, because it needs to be done.
And I feel like that's part of why they wrote it that way is, Jefferson and the 56 signers of the Declaration, they kind of had already come to terms with the fact that this is what we needed to do. But this is a declaration not just to Great Britain, but also to the other colonists to say, again, things are going to get worse before they're going to get better, but you really need to trust us here because they could get worse and not get better if we stay the course. So I think that, when we think about the audience to the Declaration, we think about it as, as we've been discussing it as a breakup letter to Great Britain, but it's also to offer some assurance to the other members of the colonies. Yes, this is very serious, but you know, we know what we're doing essentially, or they want it to make it sound like they at least know what they're doing.
Yeah, because you mentioned the audience, and I think that's a really important point, is the audience isn't just the king and parliament, it's the colonist, it's also the rest of the world, right?
Yes.
Because they know that this is gonna have reverberations everywhere, and they're going to need support, as we find later in the revolution, from other countries in order to stand on their own, and so, this is it's a breakup letter, right? But it's also like a recruitment letter for this new system of government, this new nation that is being formed.
We're breaking up with Great Britain and we're on the market. Who's interested?
How
Like Flash.
modern. How modern. All right, where were we here? But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is the right, it is the duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for the future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. So again, they're reiterating, like this is a serious thing. We have these we're doing this for a reason, right? And it's because of the king. And I think this is also interesting is Jefferson and the writers used kind of the king as the bad guy here.
Mhm.
They really know it's parliament too. It's not just the king, but
Right.
it is easier to point the finger at one individual and to make them the bad guy to rally people to their side. And so it's a little politics here at
Yeah.
play.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then they go on to list all of these reasons. It's like I said, it's a breakup letter, and it's like, you don't call me back enough. You're not there when I need you.
Yeah, it is, but, uh, regardless if we're gonna call it a breakup letter, a political document, anything, if you want people to take you seriously, you have to back up your argument with facts because your flowery language is only going to go so far. And as we were just discussing, there were various audiences for this too. And I think that this point about the list of grievances, um, that is part of what is targeted at the rest of the world because not only are the colonies breaking up with Great Britain, but they want to be a new nation. They don't want to be the colony of another nation. They don't want France to sweep in and be like, "Oh, we will substitute, our government for the British government." No, they're saying we want to stand on our own 2 feet. Um, so yeah, I think that the list of grievances is, likewise a very important part of this document. And the part that you just read is setting up that, these grievances didn't just happen overnight. It's been over the course of years that this has been building and it's finally reached a breaking point.
And so we're not going to sit here and go through all of the grievances. We
There's
want
a
to
lot.
keep this. We want to keep this short, but there are a few that I want to read through. And you know, I know that there is a guy in the White House right now that's pretty polarizing. Okay, I'm not going to mention his name, but if you might think of him while I read some of these grievances,
Mm.
you might feel a little similar to our founders. So let's see here. He has refused to assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them. I kind of think about like the whole thing when he was running for re-election, and we had the immigration bill that was, like, on the table, and he was like, "No, don't pass that. It'll hurt me. I won't be able to get reelected." And what happened? They didn't pass it.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. That was, I think, a disappointing moment in our nation's history.
he has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people. Large districts of people?
Yeah.
Unless
Uh,
those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. I think this is like one of the most important grievances listed because it says right of representation. And it's something that I really have been talking about for years now when it comes to uncapping the House is like we have a right, we talked about equality. It's an equality. How do you get anything equal? You're never going to be equality isn't about everybody getting the same thing. It's about everybody having a voice, everybody having a chance to shape or craft the world that they live in. And in a representative democracy, equality is representation. And as those districts become unequal, Wyoming has 600,000 or less, Delaware has nearly a million. That's inequality right there because the citizens of those districts are imbalanced and their voices are either drowned out or elevated depending on where they live.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly right. And in the current conversations, as they relate specifically to uncapping the House, people talk about how having more members in the House is going to be chaotic, it's going to be unruly. Well, having a million people in one district is chaotic and unruly. And I feel like we're focused on the wrong aspect of the math. And this grievance that you just read from the Declaration kind of goes to that point. The point is about people having access to representation, not representatives having access to a cushy office that's maybe bigger than if they had to share the building with more people.
Which goes to the next one.
Mhm.
He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. And I cannot stress how important this is. This is exactly what an average citizen goes through if they want to be part of the system, right? Like I had to travel over an hour to my local town hall on a Monday night in the rain, right? Like and our founders, when they wrote the Constitution and they were considering the size of the districts and the ratio of the representatives, they took into account how easy it would be for citizens to participate in government. They didn't want them to get fatigued. They wanted them to be engaged and active in their government because they understood it would be easier to like have a harmonious country that way, and b it'd be easier for the leaders to know where to lead if they understood the people they were leading.
Right. I think that that's exactly right. And, not only do these districts have too many people in them, like you just said, they're also gerrymandered. So not only does it take an hour to get to where you're going, but you have to traverse like weird geography. And there are communities that are connected that, quite frankly, just shouldn't be. So not only do the districts have too many people in them, but the geographic areas often make no sense.
Yeah, you have to drive through like 4 districts to get back to your district to go to the town hall, yeah.
Yeah, it's wild and, like, I think about so I live on, like, the edge of a county line and, like, I get, you gotta draw the line somewhere. Um, but it's frustrating when the line is, like, literally in your backyard, and so, I don't wanna get too off topic, but, like, my town's school just redistricted, and our local school districts are gerrymandered, and so, even just on the very local level, I went to school board meetings, I did all of these things. The line is literally in my backyard, so, like, my kid doesn't go to school with the kids whose backyard touch my yard, and, I feel like I did all of the right things. I went to the meeting, so I had my voice heard, and I understand, having your voice heard and having the people in power ultimately agree with you are not necessarily going to be the same thing. But even on the local level, representative government, beyond uncapping the House has gotten very frustrating.
So just a couple more of these grievances here. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that the purpose of obstructing the laws of naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of land. So, like, again, this is kind of like the battle that we're having right now between the nationalist and like everybody else in the country. We just had the birthright citizenship is, I think people don't seem to understand, but population really makes you strong.
Yeah.
Why did Rome conquer so many lands? Was it for the resources? But it was also for the people, right? Like, and the United States is kind of a different empire where instead of going out and conquering and gaining population, it's allowed people to come here and us to grow strong.
Right.
And so like it's very eerily similar to like what the king was doing is if the king is trying to make us weak, right? And because if we outpopulate Britain, then they're never going to be able to whip us into shape.
Right.
So um, I'm not sure what the leaders are doing right now, but
I don't think anybody knows, but, it's kind of that old adage that, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And so that's why I think it is important to do what we're doing today and revisit this list of grievances because, yeah, so many of them do ring true today with the government in its current form.
all right, just two more here. For cutting off trade with all parts of the world or imposing taxes on us without our consent. Interesting.
Tariff
Uh,
one?
I know, right? Tariffs. One of the remarkable things about America was it was this massive free trade zone. It was kind of the first of its kind, and it really helped our country grow economically. And what I don't think that most Americans would agree with the policies that are being put in place, and they're being dictated from the executive office and not the legislative branch. And we argue a lot of that is because of the district size, because there aren't enough representatives. There is this disconnect between the people and the people governing us, and that leads the people in office, the House of Representatives and the Senate, often to just kind of sit idly by and do nothing. And that's allowed, a president to come in and just try to represent a faction of people that feel really, frustrated by the system, but it's a small faction of people, and he's governing by fiat as opposed to, by actual representative bodies.
Yeah, I mean, again, another cliche, nature abhors a vacuum. If Congress isn't going to do its work and it's not going to debate and deliberate these issues like what we should be taxing, what we shouldn't, the executive branch is going to step in and it's going to fill that vacuum or fill that void. And they're going to do it as we see what's happening right now for a small faction of people, which is not the way that our government is designed to work. And obviously, we have we're talking about the Declaration, not the Constitution, but the way our government is designed now is we have these separation of powers, we have these checks and balances. When they're not working as designed, we see things get off balance, and that leads to things like what we're seeing in the executive branch right now. That's why we need a Congress that can function and that can do its job and that can actually respond to the things that the people want. Because I think regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, one universal thing is, with the exception of this very small faction of people, most people that I speak to will say, I don't feel like the government represents me. And that's a huge problem.
Yeah, and to kind of expand on that just a little bit, that small faction of people that the current people in power are representing, they felt like that too.
They did.
Right? Like they felt like they weren't being represented, and they've taken some, massive steps to rectify that. And they're not rectifying it in like an honest and dignified way. They're saying, "Hey, this government wasn't representing me. It's supposed to represent me, so I'm just going to make it do what I want." Right? I'm going to take control of it, and I'm going to, you know, who cares about everybody else? And it's like, well, don't you remember what it feels like to be ignored and to be unrepresented? Don't you want to fix the system to actually make it represent people? Because ultimately, their voice should be heard too.
Well, right.
And
problem is going to keep happening with a different faction of people once they get power if we don't fix the underlying structural problem. And the underlying structural problem is that the representation structure that we have in this country no longer fits the population that we have.
Right. So I'm not gonna read the rest of it because we're pushed up against our time here. We want to keep this short and we want people to really kind of understand these. I do want to read this line though. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states. So, like, first, representatives. They are representatives, okay? They are not rulers, they are not kings. They are representatives of the people and they are speaking for the people. And I think that a lot of times our representatives don't really think that way about their position. They don't think like, like you're just like the customer representative that I called in to like work on my car, right?
Right.
Like you have a responsibility to the government and you know that, but you also have a responsibility to the customer, right? And you're kind of like that middle person that's supposed to understand both to make
Right.
things work. It doesn't mean that you give us everything that we want, but you should educate us when we're wrong and help us solve the problems when we're right.
Right. And, I know from my time being a former Hill staffer, a lot of times people get elected and they say all of the right things that help get them elected. Then once they get there, they are more focused on, what committee assignment am I going to get? Can I be like a subcommittee chair somewhere? How can I rise the ranks in my party's leadership? How can I get on TV and, build my brand? They're focused on those things and not on the constituent services, which are really what they should be focused on once they get there. You represent all of these people. And yes, when you have a leadership position within Congress, ideally you can do more for the people that you represent. But that's really not what we see in most cases. Really, we see the emphasis is on trying to climb the ranks and be seen as someone who matters in that party structure because that party structure has really taken precedence over that representation of the people part of the job. And again, I think that's part of why we see the discontent that we see now, because when you're not focused on the representation, that's why people just feel so disconnected from their government. It's just not there.
Yeah. So, thank you guys for joining in. We appreciate it. If you want to be part of kind of like what our founders did, right? We're not looking to break the bonds of that we have with the United States. We're looking to as Yuval Levin would say, a renewal of these founding principles. We've got a declaration for representation on our website, projectnocap.com. You can go there and sign it. Let your representatives know that just like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and the rest of our founders, that you believe in representative democracy, and this is something that you want to see brought back to the forefront of American politics. While you're there, you can also email your representative yourself directly from our site. You can send them a letter, personalize it yourself, and let them know that this is an issue that you care deeply about. And you can donate because any small movement like this needs grassroots donors to help get it up off the ground, and every dollar really makes a difference. So we do appreciate you joining us, Rory. Any final words?
Not only can you donate, but you can also buy swag. You can see Jeff's hat says Y435. He's got his Uncap the House t-shirt on. And these items are a great way to start conversations in your local community and just talk about representation and why it matters. So check out our swag store as well.
Awesome. Peace and love.